David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, Chapter 29, I visit Steerforth at his home again. Mrs. Steerforth was pleased to see me, and so was Rosa Draddle. I was agreeably surprised to find that Littimer was not there, and that we were attended by a modest little parlour-maid with blue ribbons in her cap. But what I particularly observed, before I had been half an hour in the house, was the close and attentive watch Mrs. Dartle kept upon me. So surely as I looked toward her did I see that eager visage with its gaunt black eyes and searching brow intent on mine, or passing suddenly from mine to Steerforth's, or comprehending both of us at once. All day she seemed to pervade the whole house. If I talked to Steerforth in his room, I heard her dress rustle in the little gallery outside. When he and I engaged in some of our old exercises on the lawn behind the house, I saw her face pass from window to window like a wandering light until it fixed itself in one and watched us. When we all four went out walking in the afternoon, she closed her thin hand on my arm like a spring and kept me back, while Steerforth and his mother went on out of hearing, and then she spoke to me. "You have been a long time," she said, "without coming here. Is your profession really so engaging and interesting as to absorb your whole attention? I ask because I always want to be informed when I am ignorant. Is it really, though?" I replied that I liked it well enough, but that I certainly could not claim so much for it. "Oh, I am glad to know it, because I always like to be put right when I am wrong," said Rosa Dartle. "I mean, it is a little dry, perhaps?" "Well," I replied, "perhaps it was a little dry." "Oh, and that's the reason why you want relief and change, excitement and all that," said she. "Ah, very true. But isn't it a little, for him, I don't mean you." A quick glance of her eye toward the spot where Steerforth was walking with his mother leaning on his arm showed me whom she meant. But beyond that I was quite lost, and I looked so, I have no doubt. I don't say it does, mind, I want to know. Don't it rather engross him? Don't it make him perhaps a little more remiss than usual in his visits to his blindly doting, eh?" With another quick look at them, and such a glance at me as seemed to look into my innermost thoughts. "Miss Dartle," I returned, "pray do not think—" "I don't," she said. "Oh, dear me, don't suppose that I think anything. I am not suspicious. I only ask a question. I don't state any opinion. I want to found an opinion on what you tell me. Then it's not so. Well, I am very glad to hear it." "It certainly is not the fact," said I, perplexed, "that I am accountable for Steerforth's having been away from home longer than usual. If he has been, which I really don't know at this moment, unless I understand it from you, I have not seen him this long while until last night. No, indeed, Miss Dartle, no." As she looked full at me, I saw her face grow sharper and paler, and the marks of the old wounds lengthen out until it cut through the disfigured lip and deep into the nether lip, and slanted down in the face. There was something positively awful to me in this, and in this brightness of her eyes, as she said, looking fixedly at me, "What is he doing?" I repeated the words more to myself than her, being so amazed. "What is he doing? Or what is he doing?" she said, with an eagerness that seemed enough to consume her like a fire. "In what is that man assisting him, who never looks at me without an inscrutable falsehood in his eye? If you are honourable and faithful, I don't ask you to betray your friend. I ask you only to tell me. Is it anger? Is it hatred? Is it pride? Is it restlessness? Is it some wild fancy? Is it love? What is it that is leading him?" "Miss Dartle," I returned, "how shall I tell you, so that you will believe me, that I know nothing in Steerforth different from what there is when I first came here? I can think of nothing. I firmly believe there is nothing. I hardly understand even what you mean. as she still stood looking fixedly at me, a twitching or throbbing from which I could not dissociate the idea of pain came into that cruel mark, and I lifted up the corner of her lip, and lifted up the corner of her lip, as if with scorn or with a pity that despised its object. She put her hand upon it hurriedly, a hand so thin and delicate that when I had seen her hold it up before the fire to shade her face, I had compared it in my thoughts to fine porcelain, and saying in a quick, fierce, passionate way, "I swear you to secrecy about this," and not a word more. During the whole of this day, but especially from this period of it, Steerforth exerted himself with the utmost skill of charm, this singular creature, into a pleasant and pleased companion. That he should succeed was no matter of surprise to me. I saw her features and her manner slowly change. I saw her look at him with growing admiration. I saw her try more and more faintly, but always angrily, as if she condemned a weakness in herself, to resist the captivating power that he possessed. And finally, I saw her sharp glance soften, and her smile become quite gentle. "My dear Rosa, be kind for once, and sing us an Irish song," said Steerforth. Here is Daisy too. Loves music from his soul. Sing us an Irish song, Rosa, and let me sit and listen as I used to do." He did not touch her or the chair from which she had risen, but sat himself near the harp. She stood beside it for some little while, in a curious way, going through the motion of playing it with her right hand, but not sounding it. At length she sat down and drew it to her with one sudden action, and played and sang. I don't know what it was in her touch or voice that made that song the most unearthly I have ever heard in my life or can imagine. There was something fearful in the reality of it. It was as if it had never been written or set to music, but sprung out of the passion within her, which found imperfect utterance in the low sounds of her voice, and crouched again when all was still. I was dumb when she leaned beside the harp again, playing it but not sounding it with her right hand. A minute more, and this had roused me from my trance. Steerforth had left his seat and gone to her and put his arm laughingly about her and had said, "Come, Rosa, for the future we will love each other very much." And she had struck him and had thrown him off with the fury of a wild cat and had burst out of the room. "What is the matter with Rosa?" said Mrs. Steerforth, coming in. "She has been an angel, mother," returned Steerforth, "for a little while, and has run into the opposite extreme since, by way of compensation. You should be careful not to irritate her, James. Her temper has been soured, remember, and ought not to be tried." Rosa did not come back, and no other mention was made of her until I went with Steerforth into his room to say good night. Then he laughed about her and asked me if I had seen such a fierce little piece of incomprehensibility. I expressed as much of my astonishment as was then capable of expression, and asked if he could guess what it was that she had taken so much amiss so suddenly. "Oh, heaven knows," said Steerforth. "She is an edge-tool, and requires great care in dealing with. She is always dangerous. Good night." "Good night," said I. "My dear Steerforth, I shall be gone before you wake in the morning. Good night." He was unwilling to let me go, and stood holding me out, with a hand on each of my shoulders, as he had done in my own room. "Daisy," said he with a smile, "for though that's not the name your godfathers and godmothers gave you, it's the name I like best to call you by, and I wish you could give it to me." "Why, so I can, if I choose," said I. "Daisy, if anything should ever separate us, you must think of me at my best. Old boy, come, let us make that bargain. Think of me at my best, if circumstances should ever part us." "You have no best to me, Steerforth," said I, "and no worst. You are always equally loved and cherished in my heart." He said, "God bless you, Daisy, and good night." We shook hands, and we parted. And that is the end of chapter 29.